Welcome back to the McCoy Leadership Podcast, elevating your impact through valuable insights and conversations about leadership. Welcome back to the McCoy Leadership Podcast, and today we have Traci Austin with us. Traci has 20 years of experience in HR or talent finding or whatever we want to call it today, and she specializes today in closing the leadership gap in the trades. So Traci, welcome. Thank you for taking some time out of your day to spend with us. I know you said earlier you're double booked, but yet you still chose our listeners, so we appreciate that.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. You know, what is most fun is seeing eyeballs light up with, new trade leaders that are going, oh, you mean I can enroll people and I don't have to tell them what to do all the time? Like, it's pretty amazing, that distinction between managers and leaders, right?
Yes, absolutely. So tell us a little bit about your journey. How did you end up specializing in the leadership gap in the trades?
Yeah, absolutely. So my early career was building HR departments from the ground up. A lot of nonprofit organizations, but the nonprofit organizations I served all had a construction trade component to it. And grew up in the trades. My dad leads a GC. Mom was in HR. You like how this, kind of creates the thing, right? And I'm like, I'm never going into either one of those. And yet, where I found myself was absolutely loving the dance between, either being out on the floor, whether it was manufacturing or being, out in the field, riding in a truck with one of the guys or gals, having those conversations that were really meaningful, where folks felt really heard, and then being able to go in and really create some of those policy and organizational changes so that we had the impact through all levels of the organization.
So I find it so interesting because this can be good and bad. The trades or the construction industry in the United States is still one of it has the largest percentage of people that start at the bottom and end up either owning their own business or owning the business that they're working for. And so you talk about the skills gap. I'm just curious, being that we know that statistic, is that a good thing or is it a bad thing that people start at the bottom, work their way up, and then all of a sudden become the owner? Are they prepared is kind of the question.
Yeah. Well, I think that there's multiple paths that you can take here. And I think that mentorship inside of organizations is significant to this. And that is, I look at, does education do what we need it to do? Does a 4-year degree do what we need it to do? Not always, right? Like, my grandpa ran his own firm for 50 years. My dad has a high school diploma, So you look at these things and say, what is it really? And having that experience, is it a work ethic? Yes. Is it being able to connect with and enroll and talk to people and understand what each person needs so we can meet those multiple competing priorities? Yes. And is there a need for that mentorship throughout and getting the exposure to the other areas of business? Absolutely. And so, especially in the construction trades, I truly believe that it has to do with how are we creating this talent pathway through the organization that is aligned to the people strategy that the organization needs.
So you mentioned people strategy. Everybody I know in the construction industry tells me the same thing. We can't find people, which I think is only going to get worse here over the next couple of years. But knowing today that there's over at least 750,000 open jobs in construction, how does that create a situation where companies are more likely to try to hang on to people and train them and create that pathway you're talking about? What are your thoughts around that worker shortage, but how does that impact leadership and the next line of leadership?
I believe you have to. I don't think that there's a choice here, right? So when we look at culture, if we're not creating a culture in our organizations where folks want to stay, I think we're going to fail. We know that the job market is growing at 0.4%, according to BLS, business labor statistics, 0.4%. Therefore, if we're not focused on the retention game, we're going to completely lose because hiring is difficult and crazy expensive. So if we say, hey, why are folks leaving, and get truly curious about that, now we can start to solve that problem. The question is, what problems are our construction leaders looking to solve? And I believe this is the problem that we want to solve.
So, excuse me, when you're thinking about, all of the things that are available out there to a young person, and I'm taking a slightly, I guess, a side street, but when you're thinking about all the things that are available, college, apprenticeship, trade school for other types of trades, maybe a vet tech program or something like that. What can we do that will help us to attract people, to make them realize that this industry is a viable industry that can create a career? I get the feeling that when young people are starting, they have a belief in their mind that the construction trades is a place to get a job, not a career. And I'm just curious your thoughts on what can we as an industry do to try to help with that?
Yeah. So I'm going to give some examples of some things that have been done in my community. I will not take credit for any of these because I've not have I taught a class or this or that? Yes. But one of the things is exposing kids to this at a really, really early age, right? So there's something in our town called Career Tech. And, both of my kids went through it. And I mean, the purpose of it was to figure out what these kids didn't want to do as much as what they wanted to do. So, my son, I've got this welded heart hanging in my office. My son made that in 8th grade. As a part of this program. So, it's taking them through all of the different hands-on trades and talking with what are the opportunities for this for not just a job, but for a career. And I believe that exposure in seeing someone in your community that is an example of what is possible with that is something that starts to open eyes to that. And, a lot of the firms that we work with that do this really well have these community engagement programs where they're connecting with folks at very early ages, middle school, high school, the apprenticeship programs, the youth apprenticeship programs of what do you want? But what's almost more important at that age is what you don't want.
Absolutely. Just as a side note, we started in my past life, which has continued. We found a book that was called Grit to Greatness. And it is, you're familiar with the book. I see you shaking your head. Mm-hmm. And we introduced that at the elementary schools here in our community. And then we did a program with the elementary schools. So they read the book. The librarian brought in tools so they could see the different tools and stuff. My point is, I don't think you can start too young. And I think that's for every industry. I would encourage every industry sector out there, get involved in your local schools, elementary, middle school, high school, all of them. Because if you can plant that seed at a young age, it can only grow or die. And it's okay if it dies, right? Because they don't want to be in our industry. So I think that is very valuable. Now, you mentioned, before I took us down a different road, you mentioned the cost of hiring. And I just wanted you, from your HR experience, I think a lot of people sometimes don't understand what that cost is, but what is the average cost of hiring a new person today in your mind?
Yeah. So I don't think I can give you a number necessarily, but I can give you the information for you to come up with your own number, right? So there's a couple of things you need to think about. The first one is, what is the loss in revenue of not having that person? So if you think about that, you've got somebody out in the field for the day, like what are you making in revenue for them being billable that day? That's number one, right? So the number two, when we look at turnover, is how long is it going to take you to actually train them? We have several onboarding programs that we create for and with organizations, and typically they are between 90 days and a full year. And when we look at that onboarding, once somebody starts, they are not able to perform yet. They are learning. And what that learning curve is a lot of times, that first week, they might be 50% proficient or 80% proficient week 2. And so there's this significant amount of knowledge transfer and expectations that needs to happen within that. So I want you to think about what's the cost of not having them fully billable on the job times the amount of time of that. Then what is the training cost for you're training them not to be fully functional, but you're also investing in a trainer, a manager, all of those things to get them up to speed on it. So you have that chunk right there. Now we're going to throw on the cost of recruiting. And that cost of recruiting depends upon the level of position in the organization, of course, and we don't do recruiting at Elevated Talent. We use a third party that does a phenomenal job, and within that, you're looking at probably 20% of what their total, salary is. It could be less, it could be more, but what I'm finding right now is that it tends to be a bit more, especially if it is that cold recruitment where you haven't built the no trust factor within your community, and you don't have folks already in your network that know your company, because that company culture becomes really important to why do I want to join you when I have so many options available to me. So
if I heard you right, you're saying that you can't just hire somebody off of the street and put them on the job and they're going to perform at 150% on day one. I thought that was how it worked. As I think about that, how often do you run into it that people maybe they have a great plan and they a great plan on paper, but when you really get into it, they never actually fully onboard and train their employees. How often do you see that?
Like 90% of the time with new clients that come in. And we shift that pretty quickly. One of our clients, within 6 months of working with us, because we put those things in place, saved $500,000 just in the hiring and the onboarding process.
Now, one of the other common things that we hear today across all industries is if you look at the statistics, you will find that people are going to have 8 career changes in their lifetime. So what leaders kind of read into that is, well, I can't keep people, so every 7 years I'm going to have complete turnover, and they kind of accept it and say, well, it's there. My real question is, by instituting your process, working through onboarding, training, does that increase the longevity of that employee? Are we increasing that retention, or do you still see people leaving every 7 years in round numbers?
Yeah. So I want to name, this, there's a mindset to everything. So we can't hire people anymore. There was no one out there to hire. We can't keep people past 7 years, right? That's a mindset. And I want to challenge our mindsets. So do I see that happening? Not necessarily, but it's because the mindset has changed, right? So if we think about it, if folks, change careers every 7 years, okay. How many career opportunities do you have in your company for someone to stay with you where you can keep the institutional knowledge and you can keep the relationships that they are building and build a different career inside of your organization?
I like it. So taking the reality and applying that to your own business is what you're saying. I mean, changing that and saying, what opportunities can I create for this person?
Right.
There's a local company, which I won't name, but they a very large company. They're very well known in the construction industry as well. And they recognized about, 5-7 years ago that they were losing people to retirement. And so they started a whole campaign to keep knowledge. And so what they were doing were taking floor employees that have been running machines or what have you for years and years and years and saying, we're going to send you to school to become a draftsman, or we're going to send you to school to become an accountant, or what have you. And what they've kind of built, and it's been fascinating to watch, is now they have their administrative staff now has a tremendous number of people that can walk out and run a machine on the floor if there's a need. So they kind of get the best of both worlds, and they're keeping them working, increasing their salary, and helping them get a better retirement. And it seems to be working. And that was what came to mind when you were describing that, is kind of that same methodology. So I like that.
Right. Well, the other thing that they did is they built mentors into the system so that those new folks coming in, whether new to the organization or new to working period, now have someone that has long-standing understanding that can tell them the secrets about the machines, that can tell them, the secrets of, if you move this little thing here, it's going to make this go. All those things that we don't necessarily think about that cost us thousands and thousands of dollars and lost productivity and production, but it's also the frustration aligned with that starts to take a hit on the culture.
Absolutely. So when you're working with leaders at companies, what are some of the most common challenges that you're running into?
Yeah. So, the hiring is a big one, that no one wants to work for us anymore. But what I'm finding, because the majority of folks we're working with right now are truly hiring folks straight out of, either straight out of high school, they're putting them into an apprenticeship program, or if it's a higher level role, they're hiring them, straight out of college. And it really is that aligning to expectations of work ethic, right? So some of the questions, like I just had a conversation on this yesterday, and it was, they only want to work 42 hours a week and they're exempt. And, the new generation doesn't want to do these things. And I said, okay, but let me ask you this. Those 42 hours a week that they're here, are they producing the amount that you want them to produce? Well, yeah, but I want them to work more. I said, okay, but what if they won't? How do we start to look at the positions that we have to say, how do we create the positions folks want, and we make the salary commensurate with that? And so, this probably is not a popular sentiment, right? Yet the reality is, this is what we're seeing over and over and over with different generations, is I want work-life family balance. I don't want to be working 80 hours a week. So the question is, if we want to keep good people and that is the mentality, is there a way to do it? And if not, totally okay. Just know that there's consequences to that. And are those the consequences that you want to face?
That makes sense.
So with that, it's kind of laying these questions out and saying there is an and both here. But if you push, him to work 60 hours a week, he's going to leave. Is that what you want? Absolutely not. I said, okay, great. What do you want? If we say it's 40 hours a week, that's what it is. What do you want to do about it? Well, I guess we could do this and this and this. And I said, great. So we're going to, have them in essentially a line level role, very high level, very technical. We're going to ensure that they're aware of what their bonus is based off of. We're going to, it might be that this is an hourly role instead of an exempt role, right? So it's really looking at and getting curious about what folks need. And so often, I don't think that we've always had the curiosity for what do folks really want in their career and in their life. And when we get curious about that, we can start to blend the two together, which means that when they are with us, they are much more productive and focused on the work that's actually in front of them.
And I'm thinking, well, you said, I mean, in some cases, maybe it can't be that way, but what's kind of going through my mind is, as well, there has to be some training and some things that have to happen on the owner side. And when I'm saying owner, I'm thinking construction-wise, because all of these things we can do and institute, but if the contract coming down, for a new building has a whole bunch of stipulations, the contractor is being forced into, we have to work 80 hours a week for the next 3 months to get this job done so that we don't have liquidated damages and other things.
100%.
So I'm just curious, do you ever get into that from an education standpoint to the owners, the specifiers, the people that are creating the contracts that are coming down? Does that ever enter your world?
So a little bit. And with that, what I so often find is sometimes these things are hidden and you don't see them until, hey, we need this right now and this is what it is, right? And so, with that, it's ensuring we're asking a lot of the questions up front. And if we know what that is, or we know that this contract, our experience is that this is what it's been in the past, one of the keys that we have is, okay, guess what? This is our high season right now. We know that this season we are working 6 days a week minimum, sometimes 7, and we're doing 10 to 12 hour days. So a lot of times what we're doing is we're aligning that with our people so that they truly know what that is. And we're saying, hey, what's the trade-off for that? Especially if you have, folks that are coming in that like to go, home during the off season for 2-3 months. Okay, how do we build that in so we're getting the and both? We're asking our people what they really need, but there's also the realization of this is what our business is. And that is 100% clear and transparent at hire. It's 100% clear and transparent at the beginning of every season. So there's not the surprises. Where I see the biggest issues is when we're not having the conversations and setting the expectations on both sides as to what's needed.
I like it. I used to start every hiring interview when I was in the concrete industry with the summer is hot and dusty, the winter is cold and dusty, the weather's going to change, but the dust is going to stay. Being transparent and making sure people understood that. Before we draw to a close, I do want to make sure everybody has an opportunity. Where can they find out more about you? Where can they get in contact with you if they're interested?
Yeah, absolutely. So our website's elevatedtalentconsulting.com. I have something called our Tough Talk Blueprint. So if you want to work through things like no one wants to work anymore, we have kind of a 6-step how to walk through that to really think about it and to get the facts and to have those conversations that I can give you. And then also we're on LinkedIn at Traci Austin.
Awesome. Traci, we end every episode with kind of rapid fire questions. And the first question, and today I know we have a little bit of a hard stop, so this is really rapid fire. So the first question is, throughout your career, what's the best single piece of advice that you've received?
Oh, wow. Why am I struggling with this one? I don't know. It's one of those where I don't have a specific popping up, but what I will say is that combination of, even if you don't love it, fall in love with it before you leave it.
Like it. The next question, if we could magically put all of the school administrators from across the United States into one room, and you just had a moment to give them one piece of advice of something they could add or include in a student's career, their curriculum, that would help turn out a student that's much more ready for the world and well-suited maybe for leadership, what would be that piece of advice?
Put them in opportunities to experience jobs before they get out of middle school and high school, and give them as many opportunities as possible to follow leaders in your community.
I like it. Next question. Throughout your career, what has been your go-to book that maybe you continually go back to get good insight out of? Or your favorite book currently, if you don't have one?
Yeah. Currently, I think Who Not How is a great one. Dan Sullivan. That's when you can put folks in their unique ability and have it so that they're loving what they do versus playing whack-a-mole on all the weaknesses, that's gold.
Awesome. And the last question, in today's ever-changing world of gadgets and software and things that are out there technology-wise, what is the most useful piece of technology you are using today?
The most useful. This has nothing to do with work, but quite honestly, it's my Strava app. Whether it's biking or running or whatever it is, because it tells me exactly, it keeps me focused on my goals. It's, it has the social part to it, so it's not work related, but I love it.
I like it. Well, awesome. Traci, thank you so much for taking time out of your day to spend with our listeners. Hopefully we can get you back on in the future. I think we could devote a whole segment to talking about workforce development and, kind of things that companies can do to help themselves. I'm pitching that out there now for an idea for another episode. But thank you.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. And for our listeners, if you've enjoyed this episode, don't forget to check out our past episodes, and don't forget to like us on whatever platform you're listening so you get alerts when the new episodes come out. Until next time, we appreciate all of you.